my friend. Welcome to the Money is Emotional podcast. I am your host, Christine Luken. Today's episode is a better way to budget. Trad wives are all the rage right now, but trad budgets, not so much. And for the boomers in the audience, trad is short for traditional. Why do traditional budgets tend to fail us? Let me count the ways. Well, for one thing, they make us think about restriction, and most of us don't like that. And usually I call it a spending plan, which is part of your overall prosperity plan. But for today's discussion, I'm going to call it a budget, just for simplicity's sake and because everybody knows what I'm talking about when I say budget. A budget is really just a plan for your spending. You make a plan before you start spending. That's essentially what it is. Now, trad budgets are static budgeting. What do I mean by that? Once you create a traditional budget for the month, you don't change it. You do your absolute best to hit all of your targets for your budget categories. You look at your budget once or twice a month. At the end of the month, you celebrate the categories that came in at or under budget, and you beat yourself up over the categories where you overspent. Then you do your best to forecast the next month based on your successes or failures of this month, and you start the process all over again. The problem with traditional budgeting is that once you have created your budget, you have to contort yourself to fit into it. And it is based on a pass-fail paradigm that rarely aligns with the messiness of reality. And this can trigger feelings of shame at falling short of meeting your spending goals. So trad budgets can work okay for people who have predictable paycheck income and fixed expenses. So for people who have a relatively simple financial situation, a traditional budget might be a good place to start. Now, for the clients that I'm working with, they have complex financial situations, and a new way of budgeting is needed. For many generations, traditional budgets work just fine for the majority of the population. And that's because most people worked steady, stable, 9-to-5 paycheck jobs. Those days are over. 36% of American adults have a side hustle to generate extra income. 12 million people make their primary income as independent contractors, not employees. And there are over 33 million small businesses. So for a large chunk of the population who have variable income and expenses and more complex financial pictures, trad budgets are not going to cut it. So I'd like to propose a better way. I predict that dynamic budgeting is the way of the future. This is what I use myself and what I teach my clients. Dynamic budgeting is setting targets and course correcting throughout the month. Yes, that means changing your budget. So you know what your ultimate goal is at the end of the month, and you're ready to pivot. You're ready to speed up or slow down based on road conditions, so to speak, and have alternate routes to get to your destination. Trad budgeting is like having an old-timey paper map that doesn't take into consideration traffic patterns, weather conditions, road construction, or speed traps. Conversely, dynamic budgeting is like the Waze app or your car's GPS. It knows your destination and it responds to real-time events to get you to your destination as quickly and as safely as possible, so to speak. So let's ditch the old-timey traditional budgets and dive into how dynamic budgeting works in real life for real people. So at its core, dynamic budgeting is about setting your targets for your spending categories and making adjustments as life happens. At the beginning of the month, yes, you do consider your past financial data to set your targets for your spending categories, and you also take into account any out-of-the-ordinary events happening this coming month that might have a financial impact, like your cousin's wedding in Austin. You look at your dynamic budget often, maybe not daily, but when you're first getting started, you're probably going to look at it a lot. Most of my clients are looking at their budgets weekly, at the very least. Now, you change things in real time in response to what is going on with your life and your money. In traditional budgeting camps, this is heretical. They say, once you set the target, don't change it until next month. Like, how will you know if you failed or not? But the point is not whether you passed or whether you failed. With dynamic budgeting, it's about getting as close to the target as possible. So if you go over in a particular spending category, you can immediately see what it is and why it happened. So for example, if you went $200 over your grocery budget, you can say, is this just because I am terrible at forecasting this? Or maybe we had out-of-town guests come in for a long weekend and, we were buying more groceries than usual. Great. Well, you know what? We went over for this month and we're actually going to spend even more before the end of the month because we still have another week and we've got another grocery trip. So we changed the category to at least what we spent or more if we know we're still going to spend more before the end of the month because we want to be honest with ourselves. Now, we'll take that information into account when we are looking at next month's numbers because we might say, okay, I went over by X amount, but we had an extra grocery trip in there. So, if we didn't have those out-of-town guests, maybe we would have only went over $50 instead of $200. And then we can make that adjustment. But if we never make the adjustment and we never, make the notes on those transactions about what actually happened, then we'll never know that. We'll just know that we failed, and that's not good. And then here's the thing too, is that once we make that adjustment in the middle of the month, we can see how that affects the overall number. So if in our budget we had $200 in cash left over, well, maybe that adjustment just means, all right, we're at break even. We don't need to change anything. But if with the lower grocery number, we were already at break even, and then we make that adjustment and we're like, oh crap, now we're showing a negative for the month. Well, now we can decide, where is that money coming from? Is it coming from savings? Does that mean we have to take on credit card debt to pay for this? Or can we look at the other budget categories where we haven't spent all the money and make some adjustments? So maybe we can decide, we're not going to eat out between now and the end of the month, which is just another week, right? As one of my friends and fellow financial coach, Lawrence Kane, he always says, you have food at home, right? Most of us have food at home. So you can make these decisions on the fly to say, okay, if we've got to adjust this, where's the money coming from? Rather than waiting till the end of the month and seeing we went over the grocery budget and we went over some other things too. And guess what? Now we failed and we have spent more than we make, right? So making changes in real time is really at the heart of dynamic budgeting.
Dare to enter the Wealthy Woman Book Club, where answers exist to forbidden questions, where women of all ages and income secretly gather, where knowledge is shared, where possibilities are explored, where women claim their power. Dare to stay a spell in the Wealthy Woman Book Club. In this place, we lift each other up. In this place, we start dreaming again. In this place, we see financial miracles. In this place, we grow through the glory and the failure. In this place, we step into a new identity. Dare to champion the Wealthy Woman Book Club. We're creating a future where women are financially empowered across the globe. We're creating a future where our daughters stand on equal financial footing with our sons. We're creating a future where we purchase with our principles rather than price tags. We're creating a future where we use the power of money for the benefit of people and the planet. Welcome to the Wealthy Woman Book Club. Dare to come in, woman. Come in. Join us at wealthywomanbookclub.com.
The other thing that this type of budgeting does for you is it makes you financially honest with yourself. So your goal with dynamic budgeting is to set your targets and get as close as possible to the target. I've had some clients who have actually done the opposite, where they've been accustomed to traditional budgeting and they were celebrating the fact that they were $500 under budget in a certain category for 3 months in a row. And they're like, yay, we're winning. And I'm like, no, that's not a success, because you're not being honest with yourself about what you're actually spending or not spending. And that $500 maybe could have been put to better use if they had high interest credit card debt, or they could put it into their investment account and rack up some gains there, rather than just sitting as slush in their checking account. And they would say, oh, yes, we're winning because we're under. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. So if you're consistently over budget or under budget in a category, stop fooling yourself. Stop lying to yourself that, oh, I only spend $800 on groceries when you actually spend $1,200. Or stop saying, I always spend $500 on entertainment when you rarely leave the house and you maybe only spend $100 a month. Let's put in the actual truth in your budget. Let's put the real dollar amount in there. So dynamic budgeting shows you the truth of your spending in real time. And in order to make positive changes, you have to know what is actually going on. That's why you have to be honest with yourself about your spending, because unless you have good data, you can't make informed decisions about what might need to change with your spending in order for you to reach your goal of being debt-free, or, scaling down and quitting your full-time job and just working part-time. If you don't know what's going on with your spending, you're not going to be able to accomplish those bigger goals. Dynamic budgeting is most definitely a better way to do things when you have variable income and expenses. So let's imagine that you're in an archery range and you're shooting arrows at targets downrange. Trad budgeting is the equivalent of being rooted in one spot and shooting at stationary targets. That's fine if your income is fixed and most of your expenses are. But what happens when you have variable income? All right, that's the equivalent of having half your targets sprout legs and start running around. This is what it feels like when you have a budget and you have variable income, right? You're like, I'm trying to chase these moving targets. How can I even plan when things are constantly changing? And if you stay rooted in this methodology of traditional budgeting, you're not going to hit many of your targets at all. And you might give up on it altogether because, many people tell me, Christine, I can't budget because I have variable income. I just pay the most urgent things as the money comes in. That's a great way to stay in feast or famine mode, which is extremely stressful. If you have variable income, it's not hard with this dynamic budgeting. What you do is you set up your stable expenses in your dynamic budget, and as soon as your income exceeds those basic needs, then you add in your wants to your budget. It's really that simple. Dynamic budgeting allows you to do the equivalent of running side to side and back and forth while shooting at your targets. Some are stationary and some are moving. And as your wealth grows and your finances become more complex, this is what tracking your money feels like. Being responsive and changing your budget mid-month isn't failure. It's setting you up for success. So, I have a portion of my income that's variable. So, especially if you've got like a hybrid like I do, my husband's got a steady paycheck. I pay myself a certain amount out of the business. I've got certain investments and interest payments that come in every month. But I have business ownership where, sometimes I get a quarterly profit check. Sometimes I only get a check once or twice a year. And I never really know exactly how much it's going to be until I get the check. And so if you're trying to do traditional budgeting under that system, you're going to feel discombobulated because you're like, how does this weird thing fit in here? Well, when you're doing dynamic budgeting and you're able to change things on the fly, then it does fit in there, right? I can add that into my income and say, all right, here's how we're going to allocate this. And the other thing too with traditional budgeting is you're so focused on 1 month. Did I pass or fail this month? Did I pass or fail last month? With dynamic budgeting, I encourage my clients to zoom out and to look at the bigger picture. Like, let's look at not just a month, but let's look at a quarter. Let's look at 6 months. How did we do over the last 6 months? And especially if you are the type of person who gets a quarterly profit distribution, or maybe you get a quarterly commission check that's large, which is not uncommon with my clients. Look at it as a quarter because, if like in April, I had a big distribution check that was close to, actually, I think it was 6 figures. I didn't spend all that money in 1 month, right? So if I wanted to do a traditional budget and feel like, okay, this money came in this month and I have to either spend it or put it in the investment accounts or put it in the savings all within that calendar month, then I would have felt like I failed, right? Because if I show you this month, it's going to look like I'm negative by over $10,000 this month. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at the last 6 months, I had a huge overage in April, and I have been spending smaller chunks of it over the last several months because we've been doing home improvements. So with dynamic budgeting, you are also looking at the bigger picture. You're watching your net worth to make sure it's going up over time. And, when you do get these larger chunks, you don't want to be pressured into doing something with it or spending it within that particular month. It's okay to sit on it. And it's okay to have months where you have a large overage and then the next 2 months after it, you've got a negative. As long as when you look at the overall picture, you're still in the positive. That's really what we're looking for. So being responsive, changing your budget mid-month, zooming out and looking at the bigger picture, This is setting you up for success. Now, my final point is that it is nearly impossible to do dynamic budgeting without a personal finance app. So, yes, you can do a trad budget with a spreadsheet, but not dynamic budgeting. You need a robust personal finance app like Monarch Money to aggregate all of your financial data in one place and execute your dynamic budget. You know, the average person has 5 bank accounts and 4 active credit cards. So that's a lot of different places where spending is happening. And let's not forget your cash apps like PayPal and Venmo. And a lot of times those are out of sight, out of mind, right? But you need a personal finance app that brings all that data together into your budget. Using an app like Monarch Money will show you exactly what effects changing a particular budget category will have on your overall plan. It helps you to better forecast your future spending, and it keeps historical data right at your fingertips. So if you go to a particular budget category like groceries and you click on what you've set for your monthly goal, it'll actually show you the last 6 months of history and your average spend per month. And let me tell you, if you are budgeting with a spouse or a partner, using a personal finance app together is essential. It keeps you both informed on your money decisions and the real-time results of those. Now, look, if you have another budget app that you are using and you love, that is great. But if you're looking for one, I have a special link for listeners of the Money is Emotional podcast to get Monarch Money at 50% off for your first year. So as of this recording, I believe it's around $100 for the entire year. So based on that current subscription price, this means you'll be paying less than $5 a month for this powerful tool. And with this link, you also get a 2-week trial. So you can try it for 2 weeks, see if you like it. And if you do, you'll get 50% off your first year, which is a real bargain for all of the data and the peace of mind that your finances are moving in the direction that you want them to. So it is time to graduate into a better way of budgeting, the dynamic budget. This is a way of managing your spending that will serve you well as you grow your income and your wealth. And if this is something that you feel like, hey, this sounds great, but I need help getting organized, I need help getting this set up, you might be a great fit for my financial dignity coaching. And if you want to learn more about that, just click the link in the show notes. You can get on my calendar and we can see if financial dignity coaching is a good fit for you. Because I actually pay for Monarch Money for my clients while we're working together. And part of the financial coaching package is that I set up Monarch with you. So if you're overwhelmed by technology, I am here to help. Well, my friend, this is where I leave you for today. If you have enjoyed this conversation, please leave us a review. It helps others to find the Money is Emotional podcast. And if you're not a subscriber yet, what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified as soon as a new episode drops. Until next time, this is Christine Luken reminding you that you are good enough, you're smart enough, and gosh darn it, people love you, including me. Bye for now.